Hi guys, it's Bridget. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, definitely hit that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on what I post and what videos come out. Today's video is going to be a wrap up for September and October. I have a couple new favorites and it's just been a really great couple of reading months. I am going to go through these in the general order that I read them, but for some books they were part of a series, and so I'm going to just group them into one review. So I'm going to start with my September books, and the first book that I read that month was The Deep by River Solomon. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I wanted to like it so much more than I did. There was just something missing for me, although I do see how it would probably be a very powerful story for a lot of people. The story follows our main character, Yetu, who's like a mermaid type person, and she is what they call the historian for her people. She holds and maintains all of the memories and history of her people, all of the good parts, all of the trauma, all of the pain. And there is so much pain within her people because they are the descendants of pregnant African slave women who were thrown overboard off of their slave ships. The sea basically takes these lost children who are left for dead and transforms them into a way that allows them to survive the depths of the ocean. Throughout the book, Yetu is struggling with the burden of holding on to these memories, and she's trying to decide whether she wants to abandon her people and live life for herself, or if she will uphold the tradition of bearing that burden for them. The reason that I couldn't give this more stars was that the way that the story is told was really confusing to me, and I don't think that I generally have a lot of trouble keeping track of confusing narratives or timelines, but this one just jumped all over the place. I couldn't really tell what was memory, what was present day, what was like a flashback or PTSD. It was just really confusing. And because of that confusion, I didn't ever feel like I really connected with Yetu or her people. And so I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next books that I read in September were the Shadow and Bone trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I was really looking forward to starting these because I've heard so much about them. I knew that they were very hit or miss for a lot of people, and a lot of people look at these as very like cliche, subpar YA fantasy. But I wanted to make my own decision on that, and I flew through them. I thought they were so good when I read them. I loved the Darkling. I mean, he was just the perfect villain for me, and I wanted more. The trilogy itself is pretty cut and dry. It's about Alina, who is a girl who grew up in an orphanage, basically, and she doesn't think of herself as very special, and then one day she finds out she has this ability to summon light. There is a huge portion across their country that is just blackness and dark, and it's called the Fold. And you can cross the Fold, but there are like creatures in there that will attack you. You can't see anything, so the fact that she can summon this light, people start to think that she'll be able to get rid of this Fold for good. From there, the story basically follows Alina as she comes into her power, comes into herself, and tries to basically save the world. The books are very tropey and very cliche, but I thought they were a lot of fun, and they were exactly what I needed to read at the time. I was so stressed with everything going on in my life, and to just pick those up and be able to escape was so perfect. I ended up rating the first book in the series 5 stars, and then the next 2 4 stars each. I definitely wish that Leigh Bardugo got a little bit darker. I mean, the Darkling was a fantastic villain. I just loved every scene with him in it, and I do think that is what kept me reading so much, was that I just kept hoping the next chapter would have more scenes with him in it. You know, for a young adult fantasy, especially for when these were written, I think that they were just so much fun. And then, of course, because I finished the Shadow and Bone trilogy, I went immediately into the Six of Crows duology. And let me tell you, they were amazing. They lived up to all the hype that I had heard about them, and I'm just like, I wish I could reread them already. These felt so much more adult than the Shadow and Bone trilogy did. All of the characters were so diverse, they had so much depth to them, they were complicated and interesting. I loved them. Kaz and Inej, oh my gosh, I could gush about them for days. So this series is now a new favorite of mine, and I cannot wait for the Netflix series to come out. Every day I'm just like Googling if there's any more information. These are super popular on BookTube, but for anyone that doesn't know about them, they're basically heist books. You have a group of criminals and they are trying to pull off the biggest heist of their career. You've got Kaz, who is the leader of this group, and lots of other morally gray characters who are all working together, and it just works so well. The books jump from different perspectives in each chapter, so you get a really great idea of what everyone's motivations are, how they fit into this puzzle, how they're going to work together, what their strengths are, and just love it. That's all I really have to say. 5 stars for both of them. All right, now that I'm done gushing about Six of Crows, I'll get to my next book that I read in September, which is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. This book is super controversial. People seem to either love it or absolutely hate it. And I'm just gonna put it out there that I thought it was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. In the book, a woman is driving with her boyfriend to go meet his parents for the first time. Throughout the ride, she is thinking about her relationship with Jake. She's thinking about her past relationships, her outlooks on life, her life experiences. And she just is kind of convincing herself that things aren't gonna work out. They're not gonna go anywhere with Jake, and that she should just end things now. While she's going through these memories and these thoughts, she starts to reveal these kind of creepy things that have been happening in her life. For example, she keeps getting these incessant phone calls. Sometimes there's nobody on the other end. Sometimes they leave these really weird messages for her. And it just starts off the story on this really just creepy, tense note. Then you get to his parents' house, and from there, things just get weirder and weirder. And I loved it. It was that constant state of tension that you just knew something was not right here, and you just didn't know what it was. You didn't know how everything was gonna resolve. And I really, really liked it. The ending was super, super weird. It disturbed me to my core, and I can see why people didn't really like it, but I really did, so I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read in September was The Wall by John Lanchester. This was not a good book for me. I gave it 2 stars. The premise of this book is that we are living in England, I assume, in the near future, and climate change has destroyed our resources, there are constant wars, and we decided that we're going to put a giant wall up around the coastline of the country to keep out the others. Every citizen at some point in their life has to serve on the wall and guard the border from the others who are trying to come in, because the others, they're literally just like living out at sea. The land is what they're guarding. They don't want people to come in and take their resources. The story then follows our protagonist, Joseph Kavanaugh, who is a guard on the wall, and it just kind of follows him as he gets used to this life. It was so boring. I mean, even in the book, it admits that it's boring. It's constant descriptions of cement and concrete and the sea and the cloudy sky and how bored they are standing there for 12 hours. And I was like, if you have to keep describing boring actions for 20 pages at a time, what makes you think that this is going to be an exciting book to read about? It's just going to be boring because you're describing boring things. So I didn't like it. I was gonna give it 1 star, and then towards like the middle end of the book, it actually got pretty interesting. So I bumped it up a star just for that, because I actually would have read more about what happens later in the book than the first 2/3 of the book where he's just standing on a wall. The next book that I read in September was Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, and I thought this was so much fun. I gave it 4 stars. It was a wonderful African-inspired fantasy novel. It was just so much fun to read, but I'm not really going to talk that much about it. If you're interested to know more about my thoughts and what the book is about, I did post a standalone review a couple of weeks ago, so definitely go check that out. I will link that above and also in the description below. Next, I read The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle, and I gave it 4 stars. This is a retelling of H.P. Lovecraft's Horror at Red Hook, which I have never read, but looking into it, sounds like it was a pretty racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant horror story by Lovecraft. And I mean, I think it's well known at this point that Lovecraft was not a very good human being. So this book tries to take back that story, and it tells it from the perspective of a black man living in Harlem in the 1920s when this was supposed to take place. The man that we follow is Charles Thomas Tester, who is then known as Black Tom. He is just trying to survive as a black man in 1920s Harlem, and generally he's a pretty likable character. One day he attracts the attention of a rich, kind of eccentric old man, and he shows him the secrets and the horrors of the universe. The one thing that I did not like about this book was that half of the book is told from the perspective of Detective Malone, who is another character in the story who is trying to figure out what is going on with Black Tom and this eccentric old man that he's with. He knows that something's up, there's something going on in the background, and he's trying to figure it out. I wish that the story didn't follow him as much because it's called The Ballad of Black Tom. I think Charles Thomas Tester is the interesting character here, and he just wasn't highlighted as much as I wished that he was. Because of that, I had to knock off a star, and I ended up giving it 4 stars, but it was still such a great story. It's a novella, so it's really short, it's easy to get through, and it was just really creative to take this story that was already out there and had a lot of problematic aspects to it and tried to reframe it in a new way that was more fun. The next book that I read in September was another novella called Train Dreams by Denis Johnson, and I gave it 3 stars. This is an epic of a man's life basically condensed into a novella. The story follows Robert Granier, who is a day laborer in the early 20th century out, I think in like maybe the Midwest somewhere, and you just see him from the start of his life up until close to the end, how he sees the world changing, how he changes, the pain and the trauma that he goes through throughout his life, and the struggles that he faces as just a laborer in this new century. The book makes you feel a lot for this character in such a short span. I think that it's only like maybe a little over 100 pages, and I think that to be able to do that in such a short time frame is an accomplishment in and of itself. I really liked this book. I know that 3 stars does seem kind of low for a book that I enjoyed, but it just wasn't like my type of book, but I really appreciated it for what it was, and I think that it holds a lot of merit. All right, on to October. The first book that I read was Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars. I've heard so many good things about it for so long, and I just kept putting off reading it, but it was just so beautiful. This is, I don't even want to say it's a retelling because it feels very classic to me, but it's a retelling of Achilles and Patroclus, and it follows the 2 of them from childhood into their adulthood as Achilles comes into this legend that he is prophesized to be. The story itself is told from Patroclus's point of view, and I just loved it. You see from the very start how drawn to Achilles he was. You see the love that he has for him and this friendship and relationship that grows. I just loved how you saw the 2 of them growing up from adolescence to adulthood and this just beautiful love that they develop for each other. It was just such a wonderful story. I cried, my heart just hurt afterwards, and it just felt like I read a piece of art. Everyone should read this. It's easy to read, it's emotional, and it's beautiful, and I cannot recommend it enough. Next, I read Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman, and this was another 2-star read for me, and I was shocked by it. I thought this was a sure winner. I thought I would love it, but it just did not work for me at all. It follows our 2 main characters, Elio and Oliver, who are living in Italy over the summer. Oliver is sort of like a resident in Elio's house just for the summer to kind of pursue his studies. It's sort of like a fellowship. He is older, he's in his 20s, and Elio is 17. They end up having this sort of will they, won't they relationship where Elio is just pining after Oliver the whole time and just hating his life that it seems that Oliver hates him. And it ends up becoming this story about their relationship with each other and discovering themselves. I did not like this at all. I rated it 3 stars to begin with, and then when I went back to think about it, I dropped it down to 2 because I just didn't like it. Elio was so annoying. He was so whiny, and you know, 17-year-olds just do not think the way that he was written thinking. And I don't know, I didn't like it. It was really disappointing, and I wished I liked it more. I'm thinking that I may like the movie better than the book because I won't have to listen to Elio's internal monologue the whole time. So that was probably my most disappointing read of the last 2 months. Next, I read Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, which I gave 5 stars, and it was just the perfect weird little novella. This is about a housewife who is in an unhappy marriage. She's lost her child and she's very depressed, and her husband just doesn't really like her anymore. She knows that he's probably having an affair with somebody, and she's just really miserable. One day she starts hearing these strange messages on the radio or on the TV that seem to be directed to her specifically. Then she hears a notice one day about this swamp monster amphibious creature that escaped from a lab and is on the loose and has killed 2 people already, and in walks into her kitchen this creature. He is an intelligent being. He can, he's think and speak. He's basically in the shape of a man, but a little bit amphibious, and she ends up starting an affair with him. She falls in love with him, and they teach each other about life and about each other, and it was surprisingly sweet. I loved it. It was so weird and out there, but it was just kind of heartwarming. I also really liked that the end of the book is left a little bit vague. So once you close that last page, you're left thinking about it and wondering what happened. I think if you like novellas, it's so worth it. I could not put it down, and I'm so glad that I found this weird little book. Next, in October, I read one that I think has been on everyone's list this month, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This was a beautifully written book and such a pleasure to read, so I gave it 4.5 stars. The story follows Addie LaRue, who was born in the early 1700s. She is independent, she wants to live her own life, but eventually she is promised to a man who moves into her village, and she is to be married off to him, and she is desperate for an escape. She ends up praying and begging to the gods that exist to get her out of this situation, and someone ends up answering. But it's not the kind of God that she wants to be answered by. He is actually like a type of devil. He makes a deal with her, and now she can live forever and have her freedom. But the caveat to that is that she will not be remembered by anyone. Anyone that she meets, she is immediately forgotten by once they turn their back, turn a corner, close the door. So she has the freedom to do whatever she wants, but she cannot make ties anywhere. The story then flashes forward and backwards from the time that she makes this deal with the devil and to present day, essentially in 2014, where she has now lived for about 300 years. She's in modern day, and she comes across this boy named Henry, and he suddenly remembers her. And it's sort of like this, oh my gosh moment, and it then follows the 2 of them. This one, I had to knock off 1/2 star because it felt a little bit rambly at times. I thought that the story was beautiful, and I didn't mind the fact that it was a little bit aimless sometimes because it seemed more like a story about Addie's life rather than a really plot-focused story. But it is such a unique story. I love those kind of deal with the devil scenarios where you got what you asked for, but maybe not quite. I know that it's been really well received by a lot of people, and I think that it definitely deserves all the hype that it's getting. Finally, the last book that I read in October was Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. I gave this one 4 stars, and it is also a wonderful novella about a woman who is sick in a hospital bed in the midst of a fever dream. She is having these flashbacks and memories of how she ended up sick in this hospital bed. And through it all, there is a young boy at her bedside guiding her through these memories. And he keeps trying to make her realize what she is missing while she's looking back here. Throughout the whole book, there is this sense of tension, and you know that something is wrong, but you just don't know what it is. And her recollections and her memories don't always make a lot of sense. She gets distracted easily, and you end up trying to focus the story and just figure out what is going on. I think you can tell by now that I really love short novella type books that just pack a big punch, and I think that this one really does. It's definitely one that I think that you should open and try to read in one sitting if possible so that you can get the full effect of this stream of consciousness vibe and the eeriness of the situation. Okay, so now that I have gone through all 16 books that I read in September and October, I hope you guys got a better idea of what I've been reading. I think the last 2 months were great. I am just so thrilled that I got to read some new favorite series, the Shadow and Bone trilogy, the Six of Crows duology, just like Leigh Bardugo for the last 2 months is all I've been reading. As always, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, please do remember to like and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see all of you guys in the next video.